So you have billions and billions and billions of dollars that are spent for charity, for charitable organizations. Why don't we take a chunk of that and put it towards building better communication tools so the consumer, which is the worker and the end user, the stakeholder, is less marginalized? Welcome to the Emergence, a podcast asking the question, what is possible when we are connected and in control? Today's episode, I'm going to talk about the marginalized consumer. I'm here in actually Williams, Arizona, up in a forest on a hill overlooking a lake. And I think it's called Cataract Lake. How I ended up here is that my son Vaughn and his friend Ben are going to take a train ride from Flagstaff, Arizona on Amtrak to Chicago. So I took him up here, dropped him off, and I said, I'm just going to take a day off and hang out and enjoy the area here and the sights. And I figured since I was up here, I would squeeze in a commentary podcast. I've tried to write an essay on the marginalized consumer 2 or 3 times over the last 8 months, I think. And I'm overthinking it. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to tune in with nature, and I'm just going to talk. And I'm going to talk about my feelings about the marginalized consumer. And it's really the consumer and the stakeholder. So what is this? And it's something that really I've been approaching. In my essay, I find myself in everything, actually. I'm getting angry at my experiences with businesses and how technology is being underutilized. So I've noticed a bit of a frustration in my approach and in my writing. So I figured it would be good to be up here with nature to just calm myself down and really think these things through and talk about it, not as something that I'm blaming anyone, but just as with the Emergence, the whole idea is to get to the bottom of these problems and see how communication technology can be a solution. Not a panacea, not the only solution, but a potential solution. So what's brought me here is the fact of and especially it's elevated over the last, it's been going on really for 15 years with me and dealing with businesses. But in the last 8 months, I see things becoming noisier with the way that businesses are handling my interactions with them. I mean, this is, again, it's really important to know this is coming from my perspective. So I'm not talking for anybody else. And maybe it's just me as a angry dude, but this is coming from my perspective and my research and my inquiries and whenever I interact with these people, I go pretty deep and I do research and things like that. I just don't take it as at face value. So I have quite a bit invested in this, and I do work. My job over the last 8 years, part of my job is to work with vendors, and some of them are quite large, and most of them deal with communication technologies, point of sale systems, networking companies, technology companies, and billion-dollar companies. 8 years here, and then in a previous job as a consultant for about 10 years, I was doing the same thing. So I have a bit of background dealing with these businesses, and it's not really, the thing is that it's the lens of the marginalized consumer as dealing with vendors, but think about as an individual dealing with businesses. If a person's dealing with cancer and they have to talk to their insurance provider, if they're having to deal with Cox Communication to solve a problem with their modem, that's the marginalized consumer, is at that level of understanding the consumer is just being completely lost. It's been there for a long time, but it's marching towards, I don't even know where this is going to end, because it's becoming quite crazy. And they're utilizing and relying a lot on technology, on bots for the interactions. And the problem is that they just do not have the level of sophistication to engage with the person. The bots are so incredibly simple. I've had, my thing with Microsoft about 8 months ago, I could not believe how frustrated I became in trying to download Windows 10 and talk to somebody with Microsoft. $1 trillion company. Here's my take on this. is that these companies are very large. They have very large budgets. And I know they've all got their profit margins and they've got their expenses. But really, it seems like not that much is going towards the end user. And I'm going to hazard to guess it's not just the user, it's the worker. It's the labor inside these organizations, whether it's the managers or the employees. That's the marginalized consumer. It's the consumer of information, this flow of information to help people understand things. So whenever I'm engaging with a vendor, Microsoft, I've got a problem. I want to be able to engage, whether it's through a robot or a person. I want them to help me solve my problem. I don't want to spend 4 days trying to figure this out, because really think about this. What is the end purpose of this in this free market, supposed free market we're living in? Is it not to provide a good and a service and information to the end user? Is it not to fulfill a need? So when we don't have that communication, Zeppelin, communication breakdown, when we don't have that working properly, that is creating levels of frustration that has its own cost. When you have the person that is trying to solve a problem with their medication and talking to an insurance provider, and they might die because there's problems with communication. They might die, their kid might die because of a communication breakdown with a big corporation or even a smaller business. So it's extremely important. A house might not be covered for insurance because of a communication breakdown with a fire. So people's lives can be affected. People can be incredibly frustrated. People can have anxiety. People can have heart attacks over how incredibly inane some of these experiences are. So what I'm not trying to do is mindlessly complain. I do believe there's a solution. And I believe the problem is much more significant than people really talk about. This communication breakdown with the consumer, whether it's consumers of information, goods, or services, is incredibly significant because it has all these other compounding effects. And it's not, when you talk about executives not communicating effectively with their managers, managers not communicating effectively with their employees, employees not communicating effectively with their customers, there is a cost. But the thing is, the way that the market is built on this shareholder-driven, large-ass behemoth of corporations that manage all of our infrastructure, you don't have that much competition on some of these big things. Insurance, that's pretty important. Communication, networks, that's pretty important. Some of these really vital components of society that drives society is led by extremely large corporations that are ran by shareholders. They're not ran by the stakeholders. And this is something and I've been studying this, has been evolving since the 50s, to where back in the day, even before the 50s, companies, even bigger corporations, were ran by the owners. So the owners were responsible for the decisions of what needed to be made and the communication that would hand off within their teams and that would end up with their customers. Now these corporations that are buying out corporations are being led by shareholders. So you get this thing to where you've got this profit motive, and really this marginalized consumer even touches on Facebook, on Google, on Twitter, on Amazon, on Walmart.com. The way that we discover information, the way that we're communicated with, of the things that we should discover and how we can have problems solved and how we can find things that solve our problems, it's being controlled by large corporations that are being controlled by shareholders. They're not controlled by the managers. They're not being controlled by the owners. And they're certainly not controlled by the consumers. That's one of my arguments for worker co-ops, is that those organizations are led by the stakeholders. And I absolutely believe that we should have more of those moving forward, and we might be able to solve some of those problems. But I do believe a fundamental problem of this in the communication breakdown. So let's just take it that, can you argue that the communication breakdown is a problem? Can we not argue that? So there is a problem. I believe there's a solution. And when I talk about the shareholder interest being driven by profit motive, I believe that communication tools to solve the communication breakdown, Facebook, Amazon, Google, internal teams, Cox Communication, should be people motive driven, not profit motive driven. I believe that communication technologies should be led by nonprofit endeavors, philanthropists. I'm not talking about the content itself. I'm not talking about the services itself or the products. I'm talking about the actual algorithms, the communication tools themselves, the software. We have a lot of infrastructure built. We paid the price. We've got a lot of this infrastructure built. We do have some open standards left. I believe that we need to continue with more open standards, because here is the problem, in my opinion, in the opinion of the Emergence, is that these tools that are being led by profit motive do not dig in to a solution, because they're being driven by a profit, by shareholders. So when those are being driven, just like Facebook, so Facebook needs to monetize our attention. Google needs to monetize our attention. So what we find on YouTube, they need to make sure that we click. So they want our quantity of engagement versus our quality of engagement. So Amazon, they want our quantity of purchases. So when Amazon leads us to buy a product, then they want us to buy the product that's going to make the most money for them, not speak to our better interest, not play to our better common denominator. And when it's driven by profit, I believe it's then not. I think when it's driven by profit, it's plain. It naturally plays to our lowest common denominator on most cases, that I feel. Because how can it not? These companies have to make money. So when you have these communication tools of discovery, and not only on the front end, outside with Facebook and these internal teams with Cox and credit card companies and all of these companies, the way that their internal teams are communicating. Well, the software solutions are money driven. They're profit driven. When they're bought and installed into these systems, into these systems of employees and managers and executives, the communication tools that are being deployed within companies and outside companies to the end consumer are not speaking to the end user. It's pretty obvious. Just try to call Cox Communication or your network provider or insurance company. And I do believe at the core of this, and it's not the only problem, trust me, teams have problems, but my argument and the argument for the Emergence is the fact that if we would start to invest more in people motive for our software, that was not driven by profit motive, I believe that we would be able to cut down that consumer dissonance. If we explored it, and it's not going to happen overnight. This is going to take years and years, but we need to start exploring and experimenting with tools that are built that are purely people motive. So a company that's a social impact investor, a grant says we will invest in this money, and maybe it's an open source customer support tool, and there's monitoring and feedback built into it, because I talk about this thing called return on interaction as opposed to return on investment. And if you have a non-profit driven product, you want to have some way that the people that are investing, because if they can't see that their money is making their money, if they can see that it's actually impacting society, that's what social impact investors want. That's what charitable organizations want. Don't they want to see an impact in society? Isn't that what they're looking for? When a charitable organization contributes to a cancer research, you're looking to impact society? Well, communication is threaded through every bit of our life. And now that technology is at the core of that, wouldn't it make sense if more of that communication technology was people-driven versus profit-driven, that it would affect people in the system. I talked about with Javier Livas-Cantu on a previous episode a while back. He's a cybernetician. We were talking about systems and the way that cybernetics works. And it's kind of the same concept about the fact of building better feedback tools, because the core of cybernetics is feedback. So build better communication tools with better feedback, better understanding of how an employee can understand their manager. The manager can understand their executive to the manager to the employee and to the customer, and the executive to the consumer. Think about that one. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. The one thing that I've noticed in my interactions with these big executives, with these big corporations and their executives, is that there's a disconnect. So I've got a story here. One of my frustrations is that, and this will kind of give you a little bit of a texture, a little bit of a flavor of what I'm talking about. Where I work, I deal with credit card terminals. So one of my parts of my job is, like I said, I've worked number of years in this field, and negotiating with vendors. So if there's a problem, we have a problem with a credit card terminal. That credit card terminal is not communicating correctly with our point-of-sale system, PCI compliance, which is a standard created by credit card companies to assure encrypted flow of transactions. That's in place, and that is a mind-blowing concept about this standard. I've been digging into that, and I have a fundamental problem with it, but I'm exploring it. But here's the thing. Whenever I try to get to a problem that is so incredibly difficult to overcome, to get through to these big vendors, these billion-dollar corporations, one of my things is that I will I'll find the emails of executives up all the way up to the CEO. With this credit card company, I found the entire executive team, and I started out with just a manager. I couldn't get anywhere for a week. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do my tactic. I'm going to blow up the executive team and CC them. And so they can see the pain. They can see the customer. That's the whole idea. They can see the marginalized consumer in action and see where the communication breakdown is. So I had a major problem with being able to find out what the deal was with the PCI compliance for the credit card terminal. In the end, I had a very top level manager telling me 100% the wrong thing to do. They wanted me to change the registry on all of our computers in the network. I fundamentally know enough. I'm not an expert network technician, but I know that you don't do that for credit card terminals. And I was arguing in my thread with all the executives and saying, please quit talking to managers and talk to a tech. So before my last email with them, I actually found a tech finally, and they said, no, you don't want to change your registry. And I said, why are your management team telling me? And they said, I don't know. So I went back to the team and I said, please talk to a tech. And finally, the chief marketing officer had to email back and say, could you please just talk to the customer, call Paul and work this out? Because they were tired of me blowing up their CCs. I don't have a problem with it. They need to see it. They need to see the marginalization of their customer. And they need to see their communication breakdown of their tools. And so, in the end, I found out that I found the tech and I found the team. So whenever I found the problem, I ran a scan report for the PCI compliance. So I told this executive team, why don't you create a link to the tech that I just talked to, their team. So whenever a small business or a business runs a compliance report and it comes back negative, contact these people to help solve the problem. Done. It took me 3 weeks to get there. And that's a communication breakdown. So, but the thing is are the tools inside these teams speaking to that? Cybernetics, the feedback, is the feedback loop, are, these communication tools that are being used to train employees and executives. And, how are the executives being able to see the customer feedback? Are they getting surveys? Really? Surveys? Is that what they're getting? And you know what they're probably getting? They're probably getting a report from a third-tier manager on surveys, and they're condensing that. So, these tools that are communication tools are they built? Because they're built on the profit motive. They're not built on the people motive. So, they're not building the better systems of feedback. So my argument for to turn around the marginalized consumer is one part of that is to create communication tools that are not built on the profit motive, to build more of those tools. And there's two things with this. One is for discovery tools. I believe fundamentally, like Facebook and Google of the future, you're not going to change Google and Facebook, but in the future, as we build these tools, that the distributors have information and they're crawling public information, I don't believe they should have exclusive domain over the discovery. I think they should be able to have their own algorithm and their own tools, but I think there should be an ecosystem of discovery tools that can crawl that index. And so what I believe needs to happen is that we need to separate distribution from discovery, and then we need to bring the people motive in to replace the profit motive only when it comes to communication, the actual algorithms of discovering and the indexing and the triggers. I'm not talking about everything's free and products are free and information is free. The content, you can be monetized through ads or whatever. The products, the services, the goods can all be monetized. But this whole notion of monetizing the discovery is a fundamental flaw in the free market that leads to more of an influenced market that I've been talking about. So we need to go to a free market. If we want a free market that is really speaking to the protection of government and the liberty and all of that, what we look for to our government and look to for our businesses to live in a society that is listening and reacting, don't we want that? So in cybernetics, the feedback, the understanding, why are we not building our tools? To me, it's impossible to build a communication tool on the discovery side with a profit motive that is going to end up listening to the people, listening to the end consumer, listening to the end user, listening to the stakeholder, the worker, the consumer, the people, the managers, the executives. I don't want to throw the executives under the bus. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that everybody's doing and everybody's busy and their shareholders are barking at them. And that's the thing is it's the 50s. It's this shareholder driven large corporations that are responsible for the foundation of all of our existence in society. And we're all wrapped up in this. And it's just seriously playing to our lowest common denominator. They're not listening, but we can build it. And that's the argument of the emergence. Is that's really what I want to do moving forward, is that I want to start really being more of an advocate for the consumer and the worker. That's why I had a worker co-op episode. I really want to become more of an advocate. The emergence is I don't want to only just talk about this stuff. I want to start to really discover these tools, fight for these tools, find funders, social impact investors, and then find the tools that will be willing to have a throughput of a people motive on their software, to where developers are paid, the workers are paid that build this technology. I'm not saying for people to work for free. I'm saying that the tools are free because they're provided by people that are philanthropic. So you have billions and billions and billions of dollars that are spent for charity, for charitable organizations. Why don't we take a chunk of that and put it towards building better communication tools so the consumer, which is the worker and the end user, the stakeholder, is less marginalized? It's not rocket science. To me, it's not. And that is the role of the emergence, is to fight for these tools. And if anybody else has ideas out there, I'm really, it's about the fact of trying to get these tools not only in our search where we search the web, but within the company. So imagine building an open source tool that is people motive built, not profit motive, that a social impact investor invested $1 million. And they built this open source tool that has this monitoring and feedback loop built into it to where they can see how end consumers and executives and managers and workers are interacting with it. And they can see the return on interaction. And then you take this open source tool set and you embed it into an existing framework of a corporation, and they test it and they work it. Now, that is not a proprietary of that corporation. Then another corporation, and then that corporation, their developers build on it, but it's all open source and they build better tools. And now another corporation can use that and embed it into their workflow. And you're not putting these things behind the wall of profit. You're building it around the intent and the capabilities of the people. And why are we not moving in that direction? And we can. And I know there are some tools, but I just don't really, I fundamentally don't think that we are on this path where this corporatized profit motive. And again, I love the idea of people making money, but I really love the idea of everybody having an opportunity to have more of a voice in society and having more of an opportunity to express their capabilities, to express their ideas, to express their innovative spirit. Communication technology is not built that way now. And a lot of these companies that are talking about these, we got the new future of the web. Yeah. And I've been following them and I've been engaging with them. I don't know. We'll see. We need to continue to fight this fight and stay on front of it. But it really has got to be about the fact of finding people. And I don't want to just throw away money. I don't want to, hey, dude, you got $1 million. Let's go ahead and invest in this. No, these tools that are built have to have, cybernetics, have feedback, understanding and reporting of what is your money? What is it doing for your money, investor? Well, you just helped a team be able to effectively communicate with their team. And now executives have a better understanding of what their consumers are dealing with. And now we're having a better role in, we're participating in the consumer. We have more of a piece of what they're about. We have an empathy, my CAPE, creativity, awareness, productivity, empathy. That's the 4 pillars of society I believe in with technology that can yield. So what can we do? And that's my rant. That's really where I wanted to push this, is talking about the marginalized consumer, the dissonance that exists, the communication breakdown, and how we can flip that over time. This is a long-term process. This is not happening overnight. But I want to start having more of a stake and involve myself with businesses. And, if anyone has a business and they're frustrated with dealing with vendors, reach out to me. I have some strategies. Maybe I have some knowledge of different ways to get around this. And, I'm really interested in digging into this. And it's like, where can we find the solutions? Where can we find the solutions to we can have the person that has cancer that can have a better access to their insurance provider so they can know that they have the proper coverage, that they're not letting the communication breakdown affect their quality of life. It's about quality and what these tools can do versus the quantity of the shareholders and the profit. So shareholders need to make money, but we need a fighting chance. We need to inject ourselves into the market, and we need to build these tools that have a core fundamental approach of a people motive, not a profit motive. So I thank you. I'm very grateful to be able to have a voice. And one thing I will end on is that I love a lot of these tools that we have. I think they're great. I just think that we need to tweak them and they need to have different kind of motive behind them. I learn a lot from YouTube. I learn a lot from Twitter. They've got their negative sides. I've got a lot of good, great things. But technology is something that should be a support of us. We should never disappear into technology. We should build these tools to help really fulfill us and engage us, not fulfill us, engage us so that in the real world we can engage more resonantly. Let's not replace humanity with technology. Let's let technology become more resonant and help us really engage more naturally. And that's why I'm love doing this in the forest here, because technology should be built more naturally. And when it's built around profit, do you think it's going to be built naturally? So when it's built around the people motive, let's build more towards nature and engaging people, and lifting people up from all aspects of society, no matter who they are, where they're from, or their disability, or their color of their skin, or whatever. Let's find those opportunities to lift people up, the consumers into the market, and truly have a free market, not an influence market. And we can do it one piece at a time, and let's fight for it. So I thank you for joining the Emergence, and we will talk to you soon.